Rajon Rondo, Tyrese Maxey, Ryan Anderson, all guys drafted 21st overall. So what are the odds and chances the Pelicans can get that type of player in the upcoming draft? I'll break it down in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcast and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with you on this Wednesday, and we are going to look at the 21st overall pick. Can you get a Rondo? Can you get a Ryan Anderson? Or what's the quality level of player that you're going to probably get with a 21st overall pick? We'll break it down in today's show, but there's a couple complications too with that. And I'll let you know what those are, including a recent mock draft that I saw and making sure that the front office and coaching staff are on the same page. Plus, we have an update on the Lakers head coaching search. We know what that means when it comes to James Borrego. So, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here, the number one Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about the team, just giving you straight talk about the Pelicans. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well, and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. So let's get into this. I want to start with this, and this was inspired by a Hoops Hype article that looks at kind of how likely you are to land a star player with each pick in the draft. And I've done similar studies on this. A lot of people have too. And when you look at certain overall, like certain picks, the top five matter. The NBA draft is largely, I don't want to say a crapshoot, but the quality definitely diminishes, as it should, right? As the draft goes on. You don't have as high of a chance of getting an all-star level player with the 21st pick as you do with the first overall pick. Like, that's just how drafts go. But you get a lot of misses in there too, complete misses. And every now and then you'll get a second round pick that turns into an MVP like Jokic. Well, really the only one there. Or just like a solid all-star player like a Draymond Green or what have you. Or a Herb Jones level kind of guy that's an all-defensive guy. But the top five really is where like the majority of those type of players, those top-end players really come from. They say, per Hoops Hype, that you get an all-star level player with the first overall pick, a little over 65% of the time. Second overall pick, 43% of the time. The third pick, an all-star, is 45% of the time. The fifth pick, and I'm reading these numbers for a reason, 34% of the time. The fifth pick, 35% of the time. The sixth pick, it drops to under 20%. It really does say that if you're not drafted in the top five, your chances of getting like that top end quality player really start to diminish. While the numbers are at times kind of close and maybe go up a little bit or down a little bit, it follows like a downward trend from the first pick to the 30th overall pick. And once you get to kind of the 15th pick or so, things start to drop a little bit even more. That's when you start to get under 10% for some of those type of players. And the 21st pick is no real difference. They say there is a 9.68% chance of drafting an all-star there. When you look at some of the NBA comps and NBA players that have been drafted 21st overall, it's actually pretty good. I'm looking at the list going back to 1999. Oddly, a lot of them have played for New Orleans, which is kind of weird to me. There's Morris Peterson, drafted 21st overall in 2000. Boris Diaw by the Hawks in 2003. Nate Robinson, NBA starter, right? NBA all-star level guy, drafted in 04. In 05. Rondo, drafted in 06. Ryan Anderson, 2008. The then New Orleans Hornets drafted Darren Collison in 2009. He became a starter for them and was a longtime player in the NBA. Georgie Dieng's in there as well. You look at more recent guys, and they're useful players here. 2 years ago, Christian Braun was drafted by the Nuggets, and he was a key piece on him. Back in 2020, Tyrese Maxey was drafted with 21st overall. Brandon Clark the year before that. And then Grayson Allen was drafted by the Jazz in 2018 with the 21st overall pick. One of the things I want to kind of stress to you, the takeaway from this segment here is those are all useful rotation guys. Some are obviously better than others. Rondo kind of being the best, probably drafted at 21st overall with multiple all-star appearances in all NBA teams. But Ryan Anderson was a serviceable starter for years. Darren Collison was either a good starter, maybe not a top-end starter, but a solid starter, or a good backup, right? Grayson Allen has been key for a couple of different teams. The Phoenix Suns this past year, the Milwaukee Bucks before that. Tyrese Maxey, all-star, and he's kind of like a budding all-NBA guy. Christian Brown, a very good depth piece, useful rotation player for the Denver Nuggets. So when you look at a lot of these names and a lot of the guys here that, played for a while, that is encouraging for New Orleans, because here's the thing. You don't need to draft an all-star with this pick. You don't even need to draft a top-end starter with this pick. If you're looking at big men, and we'll get into a complication with that coming up in the next segment here, a Kel'El Ware, a Kyle Filipowski, an Yves Missi, or Deron Holmes II. You just need a fifth starter, right? If you're looking at a big man that is going to be a center, that's going to play that role and either start or be your kind of first center, your first big man off the bench, that's all you're looking for. You're not looking for the production on the level of a Zion Williamson, a CJ McCollum, a Brandon Ingram, a Trey Murphy, even a Herb Jones. You just need a dude that can go out and be your fifth guy with that starting unit, or a guy that can come in and give you 25 minutes off the bench every single night. I don't think that's asking too much. Yes, this draft is a little bit weaker, but when you look at some of the players that are drafted in this spot and, the guys that they could be, I do feel pretty good that you can get that useful kind of player just kind of based on some of the historical data that we're looking at. And while, data and stats are a snapshot in time, they don't predict the future. They can be useful for trying to kind of figure out what you should do. And I do think this indicates the Pelicans can get a quality player at this position that will be a contributor for them, ideally sooner rather than later. You don't need a guy to be a starter that's like, okay, we're going to give him 15 or more shots per game. You just need a dude that can step in, breathe some air, and do what he needs to do within the offense, play a little bit of defense, and you're going to be in a good position, ideally a big man. You can definitely do that. Brandon Clark was an impactful big man off the bench as a rookie for the Memphis Grizzlies. Tyrese Maxey was immediately filling a role for the Philadelphia 76ers. Christian Brown is filling a role for them. All of these guys have been contributing for the most part over the past couple of years, and I think that's a really good indicator of what things can look like for the New Orleans Pelicans. And that also means that in a trade maybe for Brandon Ingram, you don't want to include the 21st overall pick, because there does seem to be some indication that you're going to get a guy that's going to be a needed person for you. And given that they're kind of in a weird spot in terms of, how much money can they spend and maybe needing to be a little bit cheap in certain places, the 21st overall pick is certainly going to be able to do that. So there's some precedent that you can do really well here. But there's maybe some more complications with that. And that involves two of the names that I just mentioned, Kel'El Ware and Deron Holmes. Let's look at that and the impact of the coaching staff on this as well. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by our sponsor, BetterHelp. We all carry around different stressors in our life, big and small. And when you keep them bottled up, it can start to negatively affect you. And you don't want these stressors to impact your life in other ways. Stress is already bad enough, right? Therapy, though, is a safe space to get things off your chest and to figure out how to work through whatever's weighing you down. Life doesn't come with an instruction manual. If there's something that's bugging you, something that's impacting your life, you might not know what to do. Yes, you can talk to friends, but it's better to get an impartial third party that's professionally trained to help you work through whatever it is and just make your life better. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. I've used it personally, and what I love about it is it's entirely online. You don't have to drive to a doctor's office. You can just hop on through BetterHelp, speak with your therapist, feel better, work through things. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. So you just fill out a brief questionnaire, and then you get matched with a licensed therapist. If it doesn't click, that's okay. You can switch therapists anytime for no charge. So get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA to get started. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Do you want to see him keep this 21st overall pick? Do you want to see him trade the 21st overall pick in this month's NBA draft? Let me know in the comments down below. For your second listen, Ross Jackson's going to have a ton of updates from Saints OTAs because it's open to the media. So make sure you subscribe to the Locked On Saints podcast and that they are your second listen. He's going to get you covered for everything black and gold. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So let's keep talking about the draft, 21st overall pick. We've talked a lot about big men, as we should. It's a huge glaring need for the Pelicans. And given the chances of drafting an all-star is rather low, I think this is a draft in a situation for the Pelicans where just go with someone that you think is going to be able to contribute and that fits a position of need. There might be players that have higher ceilings at this spot, but you can't afford to kind of just wait for them to develop if they do and go for that risk-reward kind of play. You need someone that's going to play and going to be able to just give you what you need. And I think you can get that. Again, some of the centers that we've been looking at, and rightfully so, are Kel'El, Yves Missi, Kyle Filipowski, Deron Holmes. There's a couple of others too, and we're going to get into a lot of draft talk the next 2 weeks after this week. So those are all names that I think make a ton of sense. Now, this might get complicated a little bit as draft boards start to change now. We're past the combine here. We are into like draft workout season, and I just saw a mock draft over at the Ringer that had Kel'El going in the top 10. If you look at all previous mock drafts, he's been around 21st overall. Out of Louisville, this is a guy that's a shot blocker that has a bit of a three-point shot too after, playing one season at Oregon. So he might not be there all of a sudden. Deron Holmes is canceling pre-draft workouts, meaning he likely has a promise from some team that it's like, if you're there when we're drafting, we will take you. So you know kind of what your floor is. And probably won't work out for any team below that because more data on you, if someone wants to draft you, can only kind of hurt things. That maybe complicates this a little bit in getting the kind of guy that you want, and you've got to maybe then be willing to trade up or just know that you maybe need to pivot and go in a different direction because you need one of these guys that you think is going to contribute. Sorry, there's like something in my throat as I'm recording here, which is the worst time for something like that. So you might need to be flexible and really do your due diligence and start kind of canvassing around the league to kind of see where some of these guys are going to go so that you can go and draft a guy that you think will play. So here's the thing. It's that will play part, right? That's kind of the key when it comes to it with this team, that will play, because we have seen head coach Willie Green maybe not trust rookies in a way that we want. And I don't want to only focus on Jordan Hawkins this past season. I don't think that he really was the answer to what was wrong with the Pelicans so much as you needed to kind of figure things out with Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson more. We saw Herb Jones play as a rookie, and yes, Trey Murphy didn't, and they probably should have over Tony Snell. His development has kind of worked out just fine, and I'm okay with looking back on it, how things have been handled. Dyson Daniels early on was given minutes, didn't kind of meet that. This team's in win now and doesn't have some of the luxury of trying to develop guys. And I don't think the answer was going to be Jordan Hawkins in the playoffs. Still couldn't hurt to have tried some of these things, though, more. But that's more for the regular season. Right now, you're not going to have a ton of time next season to experiment with the way that the West is going to look. So if you draft someone, it's got to go a couple of different ways here. One of a couple of different ways. It means that you're drafting a guy that you know Willie Green likes and will play. When you think about how they're probably going to address the center position if they don't trade for someone, is sign a center cheap in free agency that will be your kind of nominal starter, and then draft someone that's going to be your backup along with Larry Nance Jr. if he's not included in a trade. You need to get someone that you think can play. You're going to need another kind of traditional backup big, and Larry is a small ball big. And I don't think Larry was as bad as some people want to make him out to be this past season, but you're going to also just need a shot blocker back there. So if you draft one and Kel'El can give you that, it seems like Filipowski can give you some of that. Missi can definitely give you that, even if he's just very unrefined with it. And so can Holmes. You've got to trust, or you've got to know that Willie Green is going to play him, because otherwise use this pick on another guy that will get minutes. So you need the front office and the coaching staff to be on the same page when it comes to this 21st overall pick. Or, and here's kind of the flip side of that, or you just have the front office tell the coaching staff what to do. And we kind of know that that's something that David Griffin would like to do. He had some influence on play, maybe starting Larry in the third quarters of games, even though that didn't really work. So when you look at this situation that the Pelicans find themselves in, you need to make sure that you're all on the same page with that. And that same page just might be you're told what to do. That is a valid thing too. So the Pelicans definitely need to get this pick right, and it's going to mean getting everyone on board in some capacity. I'm trying to pull Larry Nance Jr.'s third quarter net rating because now I'm kind of curious about that and how that went. And so sorry if I'm like distracted here as I'm talking, because you can't keep doing what you were doing. There needs to be just a plan in place, and at times it felt like there wasn't for the Pelicans last season. So this is the time to try and get it right when it comes to that. Larry Nance Jr. had a positive net rating, 1.7 in the third quarter. Jonas Valanciunas minus 4.4. Still not really the answer if it's just positive 1.7 as a starter, though. So it's also not necessarily as a starter. So you've got to get this pick right because you can't rely on a 1.7 net rating to kind of carry you through third quarters. Everyone's got to be on the same page. Lockstep is the word David Griffin would probably use to describe this. So if you're going to give, it's one of the things that you look at the Dallas Mavericks and they got players that Jason Kidd was going to want, was going to use properly, and that was part of it. And they did, and now look at them in the NBA Finals. That goes a long way. Or just tell your coach what to do, but no more seemingly kind of like acting without a plan or when data tells you that like something isn't working. You've got to definitely be a little bit, and I think they are working strategically. I don't want to accuse them of not working strategically or planning strategically or coming up with like non-strategic game plans. But you're going to need someone that's going to be impactful. And if they have the tools, like if it's like we need rim protection in the third, we need a rim protecting backup big, which they don't have. If you get that, you got to play that guy. Because what's the point of having him if you're not going to play? What's the point of paying more into the luxury tax? Because the team almost certainly is going to need to do that. If you're not going to play that guy, just don't draft it, trade the pick or something like that. Save the money. Definitely make sure you get the right guy that the coaching staff is going to want to play. I don't think it's that Willie Green doesn't play rookies. I think you've just got to make sure you get the right kind of guy for him. There are rookies that he plays. Herb Jones, Dyson Daniels, Jose Alvarado, right? Undrafted rookie that got minutes as the season went on. Sometimes out of necessity, but make sure you get a guy that your head coach is going to play. That for me is a must-do thing. Don't just draft a raw guy that will never get minutes for this team because they're not ready and maybe in a couple years they're going to be good. You can't afford that with this pick this year. Get someone who will play and that will contribute. Or at least that you think will. Maybe it doesn't happen that way. But at least that you know that that's kind of the plan going into the regular season. Or do you want to just go best player available? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. So coming up next, we got an update from Shams on the Lakers coaching search. They're zeroing in on JJ Redick. What's that mean for James Borrego? Does it mean he's staying here in New Orleans? Not so fast. Let's look at that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Celtics are favored by 5.5. You think Dallas has a better chance? You think they're going to win game one? Or do you think the Celtics are going to run away with it? The Mavs have only won game one time in the tenure of Jason Kidd here. That kind of bodes well for the Celtics. Maybe they win by 6, 7, 8. Take that minus 5.5 then. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. Again, that is $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and the official sportsbook of Locked On. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Tell a friend about the show. Let them know about Locked On Pelicans. We're going to have a ton of draft coverage the next couple of weeks here. Going into other players than bigs, there's a couple I like that could be in this range. And I'll tell you who they are next week. The way the rest of the week is going to work here on Locked On Pelicans, tell your friend what's coming on next on Locked On Pelicans. Tomorrow is a Thursday, Trade Target Thursday. We're going to look at the Sacramento Kings. There's some interesting things you could do there, but I think it also leads to a larger discussion around maybe keeping Brandon Ingram. We'll get into that in tomorrow's show. Then Friday, I'm going to give you my ideal Pelicans offseason, the trades I want to see them make, the players I want to see them draft, the free agents that I want to see them add, and what that means for the team going forward. What is the ideal offseason? That's coming up on Friday's episode of Locked On Pelicans. That one's going to be a lot of fun because I think there's a way to really remake this team that is also realistic and maybe makes you a title contender next season. So now, for your second listen, don't go to any place where they don't actually talk sports. Are you watching Fox Sports, ESPN? They're just yelling all day. It's not really any nuanced discussion. It's not just what you want to hear, right? You got to turn down the volume because they're yelling or they're just making jokes and they're not getting into the actual discussion you want. Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that yelling. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So let's switch gears from the draft to the 21st overall pick and look at the coaching. The Lakers still don't have a head coach. The Cavaliers, by the way, still don't have a head coach. Shams Charania of The Athletic, just before I started recording this, was talking about how the Lakers are infatuated or zeroing in, I forget the exact quote, on JJ Redick. It feels like this is the worst kept secret around the league. Borrego's name keeps getting brought up. It's basically, sounds like for the Lakers job between Borrego and Redick, but it sounds like it's going to be Redick. And you feel like if it was Borrego, they would have hired him and announced it now. He's not coaching. JJ Redick, it's been said out loud that if he were to take the Lakers job, it wouldn't be until after the NBA Finals since he's calling the games. So if nothing's getting done, it's kind of hinting at JJ Redick, right? So that means James Borrego's out of the running. He'll stay here in New Orleans, right? Not so fast. So one, he's still up for the Cavaliers job, and they're kind of like just getting started with their search, getting deep into the process here, interviewing a couple of other names as well to their interest in James Borrego. It also just based off of this, maybe Borrego's just got the best agent in the world, but it also easily could be, this is a guy that's just going to be a head coach again at some point in time. I've said that it's not the end of the world if he leaves, but if you can keep him, that would certainly be a good thing because Willie Green's going to be a little bit on the hot seat going into next season. And if you have to make a decision mid-season on getting rid of him, you'll have Borrego there to elevate to that top job and maybe keep him going forward because it sounds like he will be a head coach elsewhere. You don't want to run into kind of the Chris Finch situation where the Pelicans really did whiff on that in the past, not firing Alvin Gentry mid-season and at least giving Chris Finch that interim tag to see what he could do. They just didn't think he was going to be a good head coach, and he ended up just walking at the end of the year, as he should have, right? That was kind of insulting if you're him. If you can avoid that same mistake with Borrego, do that. What would concern me based on reading that Athletic article is maybe he does follow JJ Redick and go there as the lead assistant for the Lakers. I completely forgot about this. He overlapped with Anthony Davis here in New Orleans for a brief period of time. They talked about in that article how Borrego has developed a bit of a rapport with Anthony Davis, maybe through this whole interview process. So you have a situation where maybe he wants to go to LA. Bigger market, they might offer him more money, something along those lines. I don't think that would be ideal. We would certainly like to keep him here in New Orleans, but him leaving even to take kind of a similar job elsewhere, I don't think is the potential worst thing in the world. So you can have him walk in, it'll still be okay. I'd previously have said, I don't want to see him leave for a lateral position, essentially, but I don't think it would be the end of the world should that actually be the case. By the way, did they overlap? I guess maybe he was on the staff after Anthony Davis was drafted and then left to go elsewhere. It was to the Orlando Magic. I'm looking at it. I don't know when he was hired for that job, so that's kind of interesting. So maybe they didn't really overlap, and they're just kind of saying that. Makes you kind of go, huh, wait, what? And So he might still leave. I do think that's going to be on the table. They might just throw money at him to go be JJ Redick's lead assistant, and the Pelicans should try and match that. If they don't, I'm going to be a little bit disappointed in the team for that. I want them to spend money. Coaches are getting more and more expensive right now. We've seen that with Mike Brown. More on him in tomorrow's show too. So you get this situation where they're going to hire Redick, but I don't think it's for certain that Borrego is going to be staying here in New Orleans. It's probably neither good nor bad, whatever ends up happening, though I would like to keep him just basically, it's keep people who are highly thought of around the league in-house, in your building. I do think that's an important thing, a good thing. So we'll find out what happens with that, but it sounds like it's going to be JJ Redick as the Lakers head coach, and given that the Cavs want to interview even more people, maybe that means that Borrego's not going to go to Cleveland here. So I still think there's a good chance he ends up staying here in New Orleans next season, and I think that would be a very good thing. I've got a show on exactly why if you need to go and listen to that one. But if you're an everydayer, you already heard that show. So tomorrow, Trade Target Thursday, we're going to look at the Sacramento Kings here in as a Brandon Ingram trade partner, and then on Friday, what my ideal offseason is. It's going to be a fun rest of the week here on Locked On Pelicans. We're going to get into a deep draft discussion on a ton of prospects in next week's shows, along with the Trade Target Thursday and other news that's going to come up. We're going to be covering it all here. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. I appreciate y'all so much for listening. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, and I'll be back with y'all tomorrow.